Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. My name is Amber and I'll be your host. We have a great webinar lined up for you on the topic of controlling capital budgets with SAP Fiori. I can see a few people are still joining us, so I'll quickly just cover off some housekeeping. Everyone's muted, so we have a large group today. If you could just use the toolbar at the bottom of your screen and give me a little reaction just to make sure all the audio is okay. Great, we've got some hands. Oh, fantastic. All right, we're away. Also, just on the bottom of your screen is a question mark. Please use this at any time throughout the webinar to ask your questions. We'll do our best to get to them. Otherwise, we'll make sure we follow them up. The webinar will go for 30 minutes and it's being brought to you by IQX Business Solutions in partnership with ERP Corp. I'll hand over now to our presenter, Richard Frickberg. Richard has over 20 years experience implementing SAP solutions, and he is both the co-founder and CEO of IQX Business Solutions. Richard, over to you.
Good day, everyone, and thanks, Amber. And thank you, everyone, for your time today at IQX. We're very passionate about making every business decision count, and none is more important, of course, than your capital projects. So we've got a lot to talk about, and we only have half an hour, so we might be skimming through some things. Please feel free to come back to us at any time, and we'd love to go through some of these aspects in more detail. Can everyone see my screen? Some reactions? Yes. Okay, great. So I think many of us are involved with project delivery, and we'll know the challenges of getting projects delivered on time. I'm sure we've all had projects that never got completed, or that frankly didn't deliver to the promises of the sponsors, or when you look back, could have been done better, or were good in their own right, but didn't really support the business strategy, or had that Kodak moment where we failed to do a project that should have been done. We did it too late to be competitive in the market. So getting projects right is hard. And in the current environment where we've got wars and pandemics and unbelievable rate of change of technology and an increasing focus on non-traditional outcomes, like the whole ESG question, it couldn't be harder, right? We've got incredible inflation, interest, energy costs, resource pressures, supply chain disruptions. So trying to get the optimal project portfolio in place and up to date is proving harder than ever. And frankly, trying to continue to manage your capital budget portfolio on a spreadsheet or in an off-system repository is really inefficient. It doesn't give you the agility to respond the way we need to accommodate our ever-changing operating environment. We believe that to really get control of your capital budget, a number of steps have to be taken in order and I guess seamlessly connected together. I think at the front end of every project portfolio decision is identifying those opportunities from everywhere, trying to apply some more formal objective scoring to each of those initiatives so we can rank them and really make sure with our scarce human and capital resources, we're prioritizing those initiatives that are going to deliver maximum benefit to the organization. A lot of that budget is pre-consumed, as we know, particularly now with schedules extending. A lot of projects carry forward from last year and effectively consume a significant proportion of our budget. We do find that when organizations are trying to manage their budget portfolio outside of the system, taking account of those carry forward budgets is increasingly a challenge. Your Capex requests are all referenced to a budgeted item, yeah? And often the visibility of what is in or what isn't in that budget list is relatively obscure. So it's important that when your capital expenditures are raised, you can easily reference your budget list and see just how much budget is available for completion of your project. I think we've all been asked to submit cash flow forecasts in relation to our project deliverables to help plan forward and identify when we are faced with schedule delays, that we can identify alternative opportunities to bring forward. Without the information of our project delivery schedule, it's very hard for the Capex controllers to optimize their portfolio in real time. And ultimately, the goal of that idea is to deliver an asset, and we need a more efficient way of closing off our projects, aggregating our costs, and settling them to the final fixed assets. So we do see, many of organizations, even large organizations, using very disparate technologies to these problems. There's Excel, there's PowerPoint presentations for your Capex requests. There's TM1 and off-system analytic tools applied to the problem. But we really believe that the solution is within our hands. It's in SAP, and that bottom purple box of our overall solution is all SAP. But just to quickly give you our overview here, at the top, from an executive perspective, that's often the major frustration for all of us, is trying to get our Capex requests, or if we're in IT, our change requests approved on a timely basis. And one of the reasons is that the decision makers are just bombarded with so many approval tasks from so many different systems that a lot of those requests get lost in the email clutter. Yeah. So the whole idea of one list is really about accelerating the whole decision cycle. In fact, one of our early Capex customers is Coca-Cola in Europe, 27 countries from Ireland to Russia and Estonia down to Nigeria. And they engaged us to solve their Capex problem because they had up to 22 levels of approval for some large requests. And just through the introduction of one list, we're really able to expedite the whole approval cycle by engaging the right people wherever they were. Yeah, they weren't bound to being at a desk. They could be anywhere in the world and able to action their approval tasks efficiently. We talked about project definition and evaluation and ranking and prioritization. We handle that intentionally in a non-SAP technology stack. And the reason for that is, frankly, that not every user in our organizations has SAP or has SAP licenses or is an SAP user, but they all have good ideas, right? They can all identify a problem or an opportunity to do things better. So that's an intentionally SaaS solution to be able to capture the ideas and put them through an objective scoring mechanism. We don't have time to get into too much detail on that today, but there will be a forthcoming webinar. We'd love to share some more details about our Stratex front-end loading component. But today's webinar is all about Fiori, how we can leverage Fiori as a technology to really fundamentally transform the end user experience of SAP, make it more familiar, more intuitive, and more process-centric as we step through the various stages of project execution. We find that, like most of you, there you have a fantastic system under the hood, but your users aren't making, full advantage of it just because it's, maybe not as accessible or easy to use, or has too many fields or too few fields to serve the purpose. So we build these processes above SAP and then capture the information into SAP at the end of the day, but it doesn't really help us. SAP is not really at the front of the decision-making process. It's kind of a system of last record. So let's have a look at a potential solution. So for those of you who haven't yet seen Fiori or made a lot of use of Fiori, Fiori is SAP's new user interface technology stack. The front end of Fiori is through a browser. and you access your SAP transactions through these tiles. And when you move to S4HANA, this will be your standard interaction with SAP. So all of SAP's standard transactions are being exposed as Fiori tiles, and it is radically, I think, transforming the way that users perceive SAP. It's now seen as a much more modern and user-friendly system. And all SAP's new acquisitions are using the same Fiori technology. Now, if you're not yet on S4HANA, it doesn't mean you can't use Fiori. So Fiori is available for ECC systems. We have many customers, in fact, some all the way back to 46C systems, who are able to make use of Fiori technology to drive their business processes. In fact, we've got a customer just about to go live in January with our Fiori solution, and they go live onto S4HANA just a few months later for some of their business. And as their business progressively migrates to S4HANA, the user experience will be Fiori for everyone, for those business units that aren't yet on S4HANA, and for those that are on S4HANA. They all have a common capital expenditure request process, a common workflow process, and make common use of the capabilities within SAP to budget and control your capital expenditure. So we don't have time to step through all the requests, but basically the idea is if you could lodge your budget appropriation requests, your wish lists for inclusion in the budget for next year through Fiori, if you could plan out your budget portfolio accordingly in Fiori, if you could request your expenditure, authorize your AFEs through Fiori, if you could forecast your project expenditure through Fiori, if you could close down your projects through Fiori and create the fixed assets and settlement rules and analyze it all within the one kind of user experience, you will really engage and delight your project managers. It's one place to go to complete the whole Capex cycle from the beginning to the end without having to train users on external tooling. The end result of all of that is maybe being able to drill down as an executive to really understand what your budget is made up of. So most budgets are allocated between sustenance and maintenance type activities. Your budgets are all for various asset classes and distributed to various areas within your organization. Within a particular asset class, let's say we're all in IT, let's look at our expenditure on IT, or our planned expenditure per our annual budget. If you have it in the system like this, we're able to see the major budget allocation line items between IT replacements, IT enhancements. We can see the original program budget, how much has been distributed and how much has been spent and committed. But drilling down on an investment program position, you get to see all the projects that have been assigned to that position, that have been released to solve, in this case, our IT enhancements initiative. Further, being able to drill down on an individual project or internal order, you can get a financial summary, you can look at your actuals, and you can look at your commitments. Now, most of you can do all of this today because it's just SAP data exposed through Fiori. What we're really talking about is how good would it be if we could drill all the way back to understand how did we get to this position? Who actually approved this project? And this is the idea of having your capital expenditure requests as Fiori apps directly connected to your SAP backend. The benefit being, as an executive, I can drill down and see, okay, my most important piece of information on this capital expenditure request is who approved the damn thing. Yeah, why did we get here? And we've got the audit trail, the detailed audit trail by time of the sequence of approvals. Because for most organizations, when you say AFE or CER, it's all about the workflow. It's all about understanding who needs to be involved in the approval of this particular request. Now, this example has got a few more bells and whistles and probably a few more fields than a typical example, but it's to illustrate a few things. One of the obvious benefits of being in the SAP technology stack is that when it comes to looking up values within the system, they're live out of SAP. Of course, my system is slow this morning. So there's no duplication of master data from SAP to your SharePoint environment, for example, just so that you can expose a list of cost centers or company codes. We also can clearly identify, whether an asset, let's say if it's a replacement investment reason, does it involve an asset disposal or not? If it doesn't, we can just hide the section of the form that doesn't require an asset disposal identification. But if it does involve an asset disposal, we can dynamically change the form interface. That means we can really keep the form as simple and as tailored as possible to the particular use case. In this case, if there was an asset disposal involved, because you're running on top of the SAP system, you're able to directly look up the assets from SAP and bring back their cost and original cost and current book value dynamically. The nature of your requests, you might originally have an original request and then some supplementary change requests come through. Your request may be budgeted or unbudgeted. By raising the request within SAP and having a budget within SAP, we can confirm, that data. So in the case of a budgeted request, we can go look and say, okay, where's the funding for this project coming from? And we can see it was related to that investment position for Fiori apps. We can see in real time what the available budget is and, how much this particular request will consume of that budget. So nobody has to reconcile the budget status offline in Excel. All your data from the budget to the authorization for expenditure is in the single environment. Now, based on the value of the request and the reason, and whether it's budgeted or unbudgeted, you can influence the workflow. You can also influence the workflow if it involves IT, for example, or if it involves EHS. So just for demonstration, if I'd clicked those two attributes, my workflow routing would have expanded to include a couple more functional review requests on the way through the expenditure lifecycle. When we talk to project managers about their primary frustration with their current CER form, it's largely the lack of transparency as to where the request is at in its approval lifecycle. But giving a clear, visual overview of the process that this request will go through, even before it's initially submitted, and post-submission, allowing every participant to go in and identify exactly at what stage the request is at. They're able to follow up the responsible person and expedite an approval decision. There's other things that we can do within Fiori that you may not be aware of. And the most useful thing, I think, is being able to add some more context to the objects that you're ultimately going to create in SAP. So we might be creating a project or an internal order or a fixed asset, but what we don't often capture in SAP is the reasons why. Yeah. So being able to add those texts and those additional classifications that make sense to you in your industry is a critical feature of what we can do in the Fiori front end. We can add fields that don't have to be updated in SAP, but they help us make a decision on the way through. We can add things like prioritization keys. So if you have a few dimensions that will help you generate a priority score, you can have users, quickly rate an initiative and generate a priority score, which again will help the decision makers pick the items that that are more urgent to allocate funding towards. You might build in your net present value calculations directly into the form. So for example, I've got a net present value of 692, but if my savings I'd actually calculated at 20,000 per year, you can consistently calculate NPV and IRR scores across the business directly within your CER request form. We all know that resourcing today is a major challenge. This project was done a few years ago. But in addition to understanding the cash flow demands of a particular project, also being able to capture resource demand, particularly critical, scarce resources, will help us prioritize projects in accordance with our, our business and technical resource availability. And then, of course, behind every Capex request is all the supporting documents. But being able to drill down from an analytic view to a request view to a supporting document view means that we're all looking at the same set of information. We're not having to refer to external systems, a SharePoint system, we're not having to refer to a Capex controller to confirm the availability of budget in an Excel spreadsheet. Every stakeholder, from the initiator to the executive approver, is looking at a single consistent data store. Okay, so that's a rough example of a CER form in Fiori, connecting directly to the SAP objects, and similar apps will then be available, of course, for the initial budgeting, for the portfolio managing, for the forecasting and completion, and we can look at those at a later stage. In addition to, by the way, all the standard Fiori apps that SAP will be providing for standard things like purchase requisitions or service entries or asset transactions. But if you don't like the standard SAP apps that are provided and you want to tailor even those experiences, the core execution apps can be further extended to support some of those related execution process. And I think it's important just to understand the key difference between the RQX Fiori apps and the standard SAP apps. What you find with standard SAP delivered Fiori apps is they're pretty much an app per transaction. And in some cases, they don't look a heck of a lot different. So there's a lot of excitement about moving to S4 and getting these new Fiori apps. And then you unwrap the box and you go look at them and it's like, oh, it's pretty much the same transaction that we had in SAP, now just delivered through a browser. It's not, it's sometimes a bit of an underwhelming experience based on the hype that comes into your S4HANA migration. The key difference we have with the RQX Fiori apps is we understand that technical resources to build Fiori apps are in short supply. If you've tried to staff your S4HANA projects, you will know that. So it's important that if you are going to go down a Fiori route for your forms-based processes, that you're able to develop them quickly and, rapidly train your ABAPers and functional team to be able to adapt and refine these apps without a lot of code, without specialist Fiori skills required. So a key component of our solution is a low-code SAP certified add-in called App Builder. We call it FAB, Fiori App Builder for SAP. And as I mentioned, the key feature of that is the ability to extend the data model. Extend and simplify, by the way, so to hide fields that aren't relevant to you and add your own texts and classifications for the benefit of the decision makers. The other key piece we add between the interface and the SAP transactions is the ability to stage that data collection, to collaborate, collect the right information from the right people, in the right sequence, endorse, review, and approve that data set, and then at the end, orchestrate a number of back-end SAP transactions. So the simple act of approving a CER form, a capital expenditure request form, for example, might create your investment measure, whether that's an order in some cases or a project in others. It might distribute budget from your investment program onto that measure. It might plan out the costs on that measure as a periodic forecast into the future, your first initial forecast. It might maintain statuses of these various objects on the way through. It might link to appropriation requests and close them out. So we sometimes have 7, 8, 9, 10 SAP transactions being orchestrated off a single process, particularly when you start doing substitutions on the way through. And that's a key concept, yeah. So rather than having to go in and maintain multiple transactions on the back of a SharePoint form, you have one app orchestrating all that back-end complexity consistently and efficiently. Quick snapshot of what StratX is. I mentioned StratX is the upfront scoring and ranking tool. Love to show you more of that. Please look out for the webinar request to come. We're also very proud of OneList. It's been a long-time solution of SAP, and this is much loved by executives who don't have to trawl their inbox to find their approval tasks. But we use OneList for their convenience to bring together all the workflow tasks from all your SAP environments and non-SAP environments and your legacy SharePoint workflows, by the way, and ServiceNow workflows into a single executive decision tool available in your as a panel within Outlook, as a web app, and mobile apps for iOS and Android. So just to sum up, as I said, at Archeox, we're passionate about making every decision count. We have a strong team of functional consultants who love to work with you and help map out a best practice end-to-end Capex solution that'll help take your ideas to assets. We've got the baseline apps, and they really are baseline apps because every organization is different, covering all the main scenarios through that Capex process, which give you a fast start, right? You get an app that works, and then you have the configurator, which you can use to just refine that user interface in a more tailored way to your particular needs. Add those additional fields, minus the fields you don't need, and essentially configure that workflow through a process designer, which is easy to use even for functional consultants like myself, to be able to just map out your stage gates for approval, and then decide how do you use SAP. I've been in SAP for over 25 years, and no two customers use SAP in exactly the same way. So you do need tooling to help integrate into your backend environment most efficiently. And please note that you're not limited if you're not on S4 yet, and most of our customers are running ERP today, and they are easily transitioned into the S4 landscape. Okay, well, we've got only 2 minutes left, so there's time for any questions. I'll just check. There's a few questions coming through here, which is great. Whilst I have a look at those questions, I'm going to ask a question of my own. So I've clicked the poll button. Now, hopefully a poll will pop up for you. If you can have a think about that, we can get some stats just to see how the community views these requests, where we think the greatest pain point is. Is it in the wish list requests? Is it in the project completion? Is it in the forecasting? Do you hate doing forecasts? Is it in the CER? It'd be interesting just to see where we see the problem. And in the meantime, I'll have a glance through the Q&A questions and see if I can pick up any. Oh yeah, someone's asked, will these apps work in ECC or do we need to be on S4HANA? No, you can absolutely use the apps across ECC and S4HANA, seamless transition of the app, which is great. You can build the app, one app today that works for both environments as and when you migrate. Oh, that's very nice. Thanks, Carol. Carol says, we work with IQX and they are brilliant. Appreciate that. Is the StratX product integrated with SAP Fiori? Okay, that's a good question. I did mention StratX briefly there, the front-end loading piece. Yes, so that is directly integrated into Fiori and into SAP. That was the whole concept, making a tool that anyone could access even if they weren't an SAP user, to submit their ideas and do their ranking and scoring. And all that data flows directly through to SAP through Fiori. So you do have that seamless flow from beginning to end. Thank you to everyone who has contributed to our poll. I think I can publish the results, and yeah, as we can see, I think people see the value there of the CER in Fiori, so that's exciting. It is on the hour, so I do thank you again for your time and attention today. Please get back to us if you have any further questions. Thank you very much.